Imagine waking up as the king. You are God's representative on earth. Life is perfect, right? Except there are currently 100 men in your bedroom. They are not there to rob you. They are there because it is their legal privilege to watch you put on your socks. Welcome to the bizarre world of the royal sidekick. For centuries, power did not just need servants. It needed human infrastructure. Today, we are looking at the most absurd, dangerous, and downright weirdest jobs in human history. If you are the type of person who needs 10 minutes of silence and a coffee before speaking to another human, you would have hated being Louis XIV. He was the CEO of absolute monarchy, but he had the privacy of a goldfish in a glass bowl. The Duke of Saint-Simon once wrote that with an almanac and a watch, you could be 300 leagues away and know exactly what the king was doing at any given second. His life was timed to the minute. The show started at 8:30 a.m. sharp when the first valet woke him with the words, "Sire, it is time to get up." This was not a quiet moment. First, the king was checked by his first doctor and first surgeon. Then, the first getting up ceremony began. About 100 men, important nobles and friends with privileges, entered his bedroom in waves. They watched him get washed, combed, and shaved. Then came the grand getting up ceremony, where he was dressed and drank his breakfast soup, while the most important dudes in France just stood there and watched him chew. It was like a Twitch stream, but the only chat allowed was formal etiquette. The Queen had it even worse. In the Queen's apartments at Versailles, public berths were the standard for the princes and princesses of the realm. While the actual room only held doctors and close family, the rest of the court hung out in the adjoining rooms, with the doors symbolically left open. 19 royal children were born in that bedchamber, while a crowd waited in the hallway, like they were outside a store for a new phone release. After the birth, the whole court would file through to present their compliments, while the Queen lay in bed. When your power is absolute, your personal space is zero. If you were not a high-ranking noble in France, you might find yourself working in an English medieval castle. This was a microcosm of the medieval world, with a staff of at least 50 people ranging from masons to musicians. The steward was the general manager. He was responsible for the money, the law, and making sure the castle did not run out of ale. By the 13th century, this job was so complex that there were actually training colleges in Oxford, where you would spend 6 to 12 months learning how to write letters and account for every penny. Then there was the chamberlain. He was essentially a high-stakes personal assistant, whose manual gave very specific instructions on how to put the lord to bed. You had to take off his shoes, comb his head, drive out the dog or cat, and, this is key, make sure his urinal was nearby, so he could take his rest merrily. But the real entry-level nightmare was being a messenger. You got a free pair of shoes every year, but the performance reviews were brutal. If you delivered a letter to a lord who did not like the news, he might force you to eat the letter, seals and all, or just beat you and throw you in a dungeon for your trouble. Imagine your boss being so mad at an email that he made you eat your keyboard. Force-feeding a messenger their own mail is one thing, but some sidekicks were hired to be human chemical filters. In ancient Rome, if you were a slave called a praegustator, your job description was, eat the emperor's dinner and see if you die. If you did not fall over, the emperor might consider the appetizers safe. The problem? It was useless against slow-acting poisons. Emperor Claudius managed to get killed by poison in 54 AD, even though he had a taster named Helotus on the payroll. This job actually survived into the 20th century. Adolf Hitler had a taster named Margot Volk, who had to eat his food at 8 a.m. every day and wait to see if she survived before the meal was sent to his headquarters. Even today, it is reported that Vladimir Putin uses a taster, who is part of his security staff. Then we have the legend of the whipping boy. The logic was that a prince was divine, so a tutor could not legally hit him. Instead, they would beat his best friend, the whipping boy, in front of him, hoping the prince would feel so guilty he would actually start studying. William Murray was allegedly the whipping boy for Charles I, and Barnaby Fitzpatrick supposedly took the hits for Edward VI. However, modern historians are calling fake history on this one. There is no contemporary evidence for these roles. In fact, Edward VI's tutor wrote about beating the king himself with a staff. The whipping boy was likely a literary invention from a 1600s play, used to make the divine right of kings sound even more untouchable than it already was. But if the whipping boy was a myth, The next group of royal sidekicks was a very real, very massive, and very surgical reality. For the ultimate dedication to the craft of palace sidekick, we look to the eunuchs of imperial China. Rulers trusted them because, as non-men, they could not father children or start rival dynasties. By the late Ming dynasty, there were roughly 70,000 of them living in the palace. The process was handled by hereditary knifers, who used hot pepper water as a disinfectant. They inserted a metal plug into the urethra after the surgery and forbade the patient from drinking for 3 days. If the eunuch could urinate when the plug was pulled out, he was out of danger. If not, he faced an agonizing death. The severed parts, known as the precious, were kept in a sealed jar. You kept your precious on a high shelf to symbolize your rising rank. If you lost yours, you had to rent or buy a spare from a clinic. Why? Because you needed it for your funeral to be buried as a complete man, or else you risked being reincarnated as a she-mule. Despite being viewed as the lowest class, these men eventually ran a secret service, filtered the emperor's mail, and became powerful enough to choose or even murder the emperors themselves. They were the ultimate invisible power. History shows that power is a lonely business. But being the person next to that power was a weird, dangerous grind of public births, eaten letters, and precious jars. Absolute rulers knew that if they put on their own pants in private, they were just people. But if 100 nobles watched them do it, it was a great century. These jobs were the human buffers between the son of heaven and the reality of being human. We see these jobs as absurd now, but they remind us that power has always been a team sport, even if the team spent most of its time watching the captain eat soup. So, which of these prestigious careers would you survive the longest? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.